Hey everybody, welcome back. It's another episode of What's It Like? I'm your host, Jay Liebenguth. Thank you so much for stopping by today. I think we've got a good one for you. My friend Henry Nicsinger is here from Overland Park. And Henry and his wife came up today to help tell their story. And Henry, first of all, thanks so much for making the time in your day to come tell your story on What's It Like.
Well, thanks for having me here.
Henry is a human resources...
An employee benefits consultant.
Yep. Employee benefits consultant. And I also call you a survivor. But so people can get a sense of who you are first, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a father, I'm a husband, and I am an employee benefits consultant. And as you mentioned, I guess I am a survivor, a little resilient because of just being an ordinary guy, but kind of going through some extraordinary things. It seems like I have something that needs to be shared with people about what I went through and what I learned and how people help me achieve those things.
Yeah. Well, let's get into that because the rest of your life is interesting to some, but you're mainly here to talk about what it's like to be a cancer survivor. Take us back, tell us what kind of cancer, and tell us about the beginning of that.
Well, the beginning actually started about 25 years ago when I had my first round of testicular cancer. And then I was single, living on my own in Cincinnati, and my knowledge of that condition, very minimal. I learned it as I went through the process and the treatment.
I assume that's how most people, nobody studies up on cancer.
Well, yes and no, in that I saw a very big difference the second time around, because 20 years later, which is where more of the story really is, because the first time around I was able to have surgery, and there was a couple weeks where we thought it had spread, but the reality was the surgery was curative, and I never had to have any other treatments after that.
It goes out of your mind, or is it always in the back of your mind?
Then, even still, they track you and they treat you, and 2 years out is a big milestone, and then 5 years out is when they consider you cured. But they followed me afterwards for about 10 years. So by the time that I got it the second time, which testicular cancer itself anyway is a very rare cancer for men, and you might not think that's the case, but it is. It's not something that's high on the list of cancer rates out there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we hear prostate cancer as being one in 3.
Prostate, breast cancer, things like that.
Okay,
they're much more frequent.
So testicular is
not.
Okay.
And to get it again a second time, or bilaterally as they call it, is even more rare. The percentages get very small.
Does that mean it shifts to the other testicular?
Yes, but this one is this one was a new primary, so it wasn't the old cancer that caused it, because there was 20 years in between. And again, that's what makes it so rare is the fact that I was clean, I was cured, and it was a second primary, as they call it. And so that is rare. Excuse me, but. That was what started me, I guess, if you want to say, obviously, on the journey, because, again, we had the surgery, and we thought we got it early enough where they say the margins are clean, and we did observation then, as opposed to any kind of radiation or chemo. Well, then it came back on my lymph nodes, and again, we were talking about nobody does research or anything prior to, but actually my wife, she is a writer and a researcher, and she had such a wealth of knowledge for me to have at my disposal when I was going through this and making decisions. That is huge, because it made me comfortable and confident in what I was dealing with, not necessarily on the outcome,
sure,
but on the process of going through it. So at that time we had options, and we chose radiation. And a little unique thing about my radiation was, being an employee benefits consultant, I wanted to get my treatments done before the end of the year, because otherwise it was going to start a new deductible, a new coinsurance, and everybody who's been through insurance knows how that is.
Absolutely. But you think that that's kind of a thing that just, makes sense, but really, everything...
Not a lot of people think about it,
Yeah.
and believe it or not, I was talking to the radio oncologist to try to schedule and I was explaining to him why I wanted it done before January, and this was going to be starting in December. And he said, could you explain that to me again? And he's obviously not a stupid person.
Sure.
He's very bright,
Right.
but it's not something that they think about a lot.
Yeah.
It's something that if you're a consumer in insurance, that it does make a difference. And since I live in that world,
Right.
it made a difference.
And
Plus,
cancer's not cheap.
well, that, and also it's my busiest time of the year for renewals January 1 in the fourth quarter. So I wanted to get it done and over with as soon as possible.
Practical reasons.
Yes, right. But they said they couldn't do it because they had a machine down and it was going to take longer. So when I went in for my first treatment, the nurse said, "I hear you want to get yours done by the end of the year." I said, "Yes, but they already told me they couldn't, and I appreciate it, but I know they can't." And she said, "Yes, they can if you can follow this schedule." Well, I said, "Let me get my calendar out." She goes, "No, this is the schedule. You either do this or not." And what it was is they doubled up my radiation treatment. So I did one at 6:30 in the morning and one at 4:30 in the afternoon.
Wow.
And I asked them, I said, have you done this before, and are the outcomes the same? And then that raised some new questions that
Sure.
I hadn't addressed because I didn't even know that was a possibility. And they said, "Yes, we've done it before, but we want you to know if you choose this, it's going to be even more severe on you because the radiation was on my lymph nodes in my stomach. So I was going to get very sick and things like that." And I did. I chose to do that and get it done and over with. And so that was a little bit of a unique, and there was more to that story, but I won't get into the details and all that. Because then we felt like we had it. And then I think it was almost a year later, somewhere in that range, it came back again on my lung.
My.
And the thing with my kind of cancer, even though it's rare, the cure rates are supposed to be very high for the treatments that they have available. So I kept beating the odds, but in a bad way, by being the small percentage that it would keep coming back. So we did the whole treatment of chemo, which was, I think, 2.5 months. I would have a week of chemo straight, and then off for 2 weeks, and then another week of chemo, and just a whole treatment round of chemo. And the cure rate on that was supposed to be pretty high, close to 90%. So again, we thought we had it. And I actually called them up and said, "My cancer's back." And they didn't believe me. And I had a CAT scan scheduled for like 6 weeks.
Now, how did you know that?
I was in pain. My tumor being on it was actually on the outside of my upper quadrant of my lung.
Okay.
And it was pressing on a nerve. And the first time it was on my lung, I was in pain, severe pain, until the first day of chemo. And the first day of chemo, the pain went away.
Oh.
So this time around, I said, my cancer's back, I'm in pain, I feel it. And they didn't believe me. They thought it was just a phantom pain because they thought my cure rate was so high and I'd done the right things.
Right.
And they did go ahead and move the CAT scan up, but it was still off a little ways. And I woke up one morning on the floor, and my wife came down and found me, and I'm like, "I'm in pain, they've got to do something." So they said, "Go to the emergency room and get a..."
So, keep score for me. How many times is this now? This is your 4th bout of cancer?
They call it the second bout of cancer, but with the second time, it was the 3rd reoccurrence after the surgery. Man. So that's
How discouraged must you be getting at this point?
Well, part of that process was, as we talked about earlier, that I had the knowledge, thanks to my wife's research of this, and the fact that we were talking with Dr. Einhorn at the University of Indiana, who is the world's best at this. He's the one who did Lance Armstrong. And all along, he said, "You're making good decisions." But we did have options of our treatment. So when it came back that it kept coming back and kept coming back, there did make you question a little bit of, maybe if we would have done this differently instead of this, or maybe I'm not meant to be cured. There was a time too that going from the condition or the disease of cancer, and now realizing that I was going to be going to Indiana for high-dose chemo and stem cell transplant, there was a little bit of a mind shift of going, the disease may kill me versus the treatment may kill me, because there's a very real possibility that the stem cell transplant process and things can work against you.
Yeah.
And so that was where there was some questioning, but because I felt so strong about my support system that I had and the knowledge that I had going into it, I had to feel like myself. I had to come to grips with one thing. It's that I have to be okay if I die.
Yeah.
I had to think about that. And
is that something you did by yourself, or is that something you also shared with your wife? I mean,
oh no, we discussed it.
Okay.
And she knew why I was okay with it and where I was, and that in no way was meaning that I was giving up.
No, no, no.
It was completely a trampoline to help me get beyond that, to say, I'm very grateful. And that was one of the things through all this process and through all the reoccurrences. You said, kind of, do you get discouraged because of that? My wife and I both, we were a team, and we never got discouraged. And if either one of us, ever had a bad day or whatever, the other one was there to help and get you past it.
Yeah.
So because I knew I was in good hands at the University of Indiana, and because I had a good support system, I really kind of just looked at further, and not at what I didn't have or what I was up against. It was what I was moving towards. Kind of was more of the motivator.
Yeah, it's so hard to think about, because it's one of those things that, like Voldemort, people just don't say that word out loud. They don't say cancer, but you talk about it quite freely. Is there any superstition in you? Is there any, if I talk about it and talk about being, cancer free, I might jinx it? Is there any of that inside you?
Oh, I guess I'd be wrong to say there's none, because I'm human.
Right.
But any kind of thought, it's not more of that. I know that cancer is a disease, and there were so many people that when the second go around and I was going through the treatment after treatment, that said, Henry, you have such a good outlook on it. You never say, why me, or you don't get angry, or I'm like, how do you get angry at a disease? No, and why say why me? Why anybody? I don't think people who smoke should get cancer. Nobody deserves cancer. It's not something that is a living entity, though, trying to attack you.
Yeah.
I mean, it is, but it's not. It's not mindful. It's not purposeful.
Right.
It's just there. And we all have cancer cells in our bodies
at
all the time, but our bodies are able to take care of them. And I knew that my body was just having a hard time dealing with that cancer. And as I had to tell my son, all these treatments that made me look like death. I mean, I lost 30 pounds. Of course, I lost all the hair. And I said, but it's helping me. It's curing me. Yeah. This is not a bad thing. This is a good thing, because I have this option. So I have this ability to try to be cured and go through this. Where some people, in my treatments, we saw a lot of
I can imagine
cancer people that I thought were all, in a lot worse situation than I was. And I don't think anybody's situation diminishes any other. So every one of them is just important as the other, no matter what the cancer diagnosis is. So that was the thing, I think, that kept us on the positive thing. And when it comes to thinking about the, like you said, the cancer and am I going to jinx myself and stuff, right. I know it's got to be a little bit in there, but I know the reality is I've got to do everything I can do from a nutrition and exercise and health standpoint to put myself in the best position to fight it and keep my body strong against it. And I don't feel like I'm up against a Voldemort that's actually trying to come out and get me.
Right.
It's just one of those things where you do what you have to do and hope that that's going to be enough to where it's not going to be an issue down the road.
Has part of your, well, go ahead and skip to the end of the story. You're cancer-free right now.
I just actually last week had my 2 years as a milestone. I think
right.
you mentioned
that earlier.
So I just had my 2 year, even though it's been a little more than it's been 2 years and 2 months, my visit with the doctor, and everything was clear. So this is the longest that I've made it since this second incident of cancer. Very good indicator that I'm going to make that 5-year milestone. No guarantees, but it's a very good indicator. So I hope that's not the end of my story, though, because I do think that I do have something to share. I don't know how or what, because there's so much involved in that whole life shift of moving away into somewhere to get treatment and leave your life. But in some ways it's bad that you have to do that, but in other ways it's good because you get to focus on recovery and on treatment, and so that's actually very beneficial. So I hope the story goes on, but not because I'm dealing with cancer, it's because I'm sharing.
Yeah. You must have met a lot of people during the process, not only doctors and nurses and technicians and all that, but other people who are going through a similar experience. What did you learn from watching how they handled it? Was there people that were good examples and people who were not so good examples?
Well, I'll tell you in this way. I'm going to tell you what actually a nurse, even though you said regular people as opposed to nurse, we were in one facility in Overland Park where I was getting my port put in to start the chemo for the first time around. And there was a male nurse there that was from Coffeyville, Kansas, which is where my wife was raised. So we started having a conversation, and one of the things he shared with me was that the people that work with patients like working with cancer patients because they're all, in general, so optimistic. And that is the one thing, if you say, what did I see in other people or learn from other people? Because, when people would tell me, Henry, you inspire me because you've done so much, or I feel bad because of this, and then I think about what you're going through and it makes me feel better. And I'm like, well, don't think that what I'm going through diminishes, like I said, what you're going through. Everybody has their issues. And I shared with him one time in the cancer center, I saw a mother holding her 4-year-old son while he was sleeping in her arms getting chemo. Yeah. And I think, I've got nothing to complain about, So I saw old people with nobody there with them as far as family, being taken to the facility for treatment, being dropped off by a service, and smiling and having good attitude. And I saw little kids going through it. And it is something that gives you strength because you know you're not alone, first of all, but you also see that it really is the human spirit and the positive mind that plays a big part in your recovery and treatment as well. You need, I believe you need the traditional medicines when it comes to cancer and things like that. Yeah. But if you don't bring along a positive mindset and whatever faith you have, bring that with you as well and use that to put it towards that treatment to help it work and help you, then you're doing yourself a disservice. But I know it's a lot easier said than done sometimes.
You've talked a lot about your wife and her role in your healing. I wonder if you can quantify that.
Well, I guess the way I would quantify it is she should be sitting here instead of me. Because if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't, I'm not saying I wouldn't be here as a survivor. Right. But I certainly wouldn't have been able to address it the way I did. One part of my story, and this is going to lead into my wife, and how to help quantify what she did for me, because going into the treatment in Indiana, the stem cell transplant, the process is they give you high-dose chemo for 3 days, very intense chemo, not regular, it's high dose.
The super boost.
Yeah. Yep. Then they give you a couple days for the chemo to get out of your system so they can give you your stem cells back. And when they give you your stem cells back, they have to engraft, is what they call it, into your bones to start producing the platelets and the red blood cells and the white blood cells for you. And they say it takes, on average, about, I think she said 15 days for that to engraft and start doing that. They were very worried about me going through that treatment, because of my age, I'm older than most people. That was another unique aspect of it, that have testicular cancer. I'd had the radiation on my stomach and my lymph nodes. They thought that would hinder the ability of the stem cells to engraft. And then just the fact that I also had the whole other rounds of chemo. So they were a little concerned about it. So in my conversations with them, I asked, well, what's the fastest that somebody's ever engrafted? And they said 7 days. I said, okay, I'm going to do it in 7 days. I told her that. And I did. The first time around, I did it in 7 days. Then you get a break in between your first round of high dose and stem cells, and they do it to you again. And I said, okay, I guess this time, kind of jokingly this time, I said, this time I guess I'm going to have to do it in 6. And I did. So I set a record having those other things going against me, the radiation, my age and stuff. But the reason I was able to set a record is because I had my wife at my side. She's a certified holistic nutritionist. She is a researcher beyond compare. She is compassionate and empathetic beyond compare. She studied and studied. There's books in every room of our house on this stuff, and she read. So through the whole process, I had the knowledge. I had the support. She was charting everything that I was doing when I was there, all my medications, every time I took a walk and exercise, everything I did.
She had allowed you to focus on
that was it.
The healing part.
And I don't think I've ever been as focused on anything as that. The day-to-day stuff, even leaving my son in Overland Park and all that and worrying about him, it kind of became background noise. Very important background noise, but compared to what we were going through, kind of dealing with life and death on a daily basis there, it did, and she stayed there with me. I did it all outpatient. I did not stay in the hospital. I did not want to stay in the hospital. I've been in the hospital before, and everybody hears all the horror stories of the hospitals, because there's some truth to that. Yeah. You can come out of a hospital sicker than when you went in, as we all know. Yeah. So I told them I wanted to do it outpatient. Well, I couldn't do that unless I had somebody available to 24/7 to take care of me. Monitor. And she did that, and she knew more about my situation than the doctors did sometimes. But one time when we went in for treatment in the morning, the doctor was asking me questions, how did it go last night? Would you do this and that? And I'm kind of a smart aleck, and I was giving her my jokey answer, and she just shook her head and looked at me and said, why am I even talking to you? And she turned to my wife, and she said, so tell me. And my wife brought out her book and gave her all the technical stuff that was supposed to what she wanted, and she said, we'd love to have you here. So I can't quantify it other than to say I would never want to think of having to go through that without her. Right. That's for sure. Yeah, she seems like an unbelievable partner in this process, but I assume that has some effect on the rest of your life as well. I just have one more question for you, and I think it's an easy one. Do you fear cancer? No. I fear what cancer can do to my life. If it should take my life, as I said, I was okay with it, but does that mean I wouldn't miss being there for my son or this? So it actually, I hate to say this because it seems trite or whatever, but cancer's taught me a lot. It has opened me up a lot. I feel very grateful for what I had before cancer, and I feel even more grateful now for everything and the little things and especially the big things, because a lot of my motivation going through this was I want to see my son grown up. I want to see him turn into a man, and I want to be there for that. So I don't fear cancer itself, but I would fear how it could change my life. But the cancer part never did bother me. The one thing that happened when I had cancer was it actually created my body to create antibodies to attack the cancer, and it attacked my eyesight. And so I'm left with diminished eyesight. That bothered me much more than the cancer. Yeah. But even with that, I've grown past that, and I've grown to appreciate things from it. So that's it's all on your perspective. Yeah.
Anything, just really quick, anything you would say to somebody who has that diagnosis now?
Get as much knowledge about the situation as you can, because every situation is different. And even if it's the same diagnosis, it's different for each person. So knowledge about that. Support system, huge. The nutrition and the exercise aspect of it. I can't emphasize that enough either. I would walk every day, whether I could walk 2 miles or 2 blocks. It's not even just the actual walking which helps, or the activity that helps, but it's that mental process of getting you up and moving that helps you also feel more like you can conquer the situation. So definitely knowledge and the support system and family. And one of the hardest things for me to learn with this was to accept help. Because I was always one who would be I was never
thing,
sick
right?
before. Well, not only just that, I was never sick before, and I was always the one that would be more than happy to help. And when I felt like I had to accept kindness and help, it was tough. It's hard to feel like you're in that situation, but boy, it is very inspiring when so many people were there also to fill that role of helping me out going through that process too.
Henry, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Continued good health, and all the best to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hey, thanks for tuning into What's It Like. As your host and producer, I really want to make this show interesting and relevant. And so we need your help. We need your ideas. We need your connections. We need your feedback. Who or what would make a good show? What topics do you feel challenged by? And how could we shed some light on them? Do you know someone interesting that would be a great interview? Well, if you have an answer for any of these, it's easy enough to connect with us. Go to our Facebook page, which is that @ What's It Like to Be, or drop us an email at whatsitlikeshow@gmail.com. Again, thanks for tuning in.